All right. Well, welcome once again to Transition Tuesdays afternoon, presented by the St. Louis Youth Interagency Partnership. I'm Amy Sickerman, and I am one of the Assistant Directors of Transition and 511 for Vocational Rehabilitation. We're excited to have you here with us to learn about our area resources for youth and families. As you know, our group was built a couple years ago after WIOA law changes to help build stronger connections between resources in the area and just help learn about all the resources for individuals in our area. So this is our Transition Tuesdays webinar. This is our second annual Transition Tuesdays webinar series, and this is the last one in the series. So for those of you who have joined us every time, thank you so much. We're excited to have you back. I did go ahead and mute everybody, so as we do have questions, you can put them in the chat box, or at the end, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, you can. But we will keep track of those in the chat box as they come around. Remember, I am recording it, and I will put the YouTube channel in the chat box as well as my email address for those of you who may have questions for me. We will also be sending out CEUs after this, as well as some of the presentation materials from our presenters. So again, welcome to our last part of this webinar series. Today we have two fantastic guests. We have the first one, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this right, from SQSH. Is that right? Okay. And then we will have Amy from SSM Behavioral Health later. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first guest speaker, which is Luca from SQSH. Luca is a trans-masculine pansexual Singaporean immigrant who co-founded SQSH to create a resource they wish they had. As executive director, Luca develops SQSH's annual budget, strategic plans, and project timelines, and oversees program activities. With 250 plus hours spent learning and teaching peer counseling and years of community organizing experience since they were 13, they effectively provide leadership to SQSH, and we are excited to hear more about it. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Luca. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Amy, for that introduction. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's always funny to be described in third person. I just dropped my slides in the chat, and today I'm really excited to spend this time discussing with y'all the importance of queer mental health and the power of peer support. I like to be very interactive in my presentations. I really hope this can be a two-way or infinite way conversation here. So I would love for folks to drop in the chat your name, your pronouns, and what motivated you to join us for today's session. As an optional question, I also invite folks to share what is your experience with providing support to queer or LGBTQIA people. In case you're wondering, oh my gosh, I've already forgotten the questions, I'm going to drop them in the chat. And I'll start by sharing and then kind of throw it to someone else in the room. You can also put it in the chat and I will read out your contributions. My name is Luca. I use they, them pronouns, and I grew up as a non-binary young person in Singapore. Singapore is a very small and conservative country in Southeast Asia, and I moved to St. Louis when I was 18, seeking a better life, a more inclusive community, and I found a lot of powerful transgender possibility models and role models in the St. Louis region. So I founded SQSH in 2019. SQSH stands for the St. Louis Queer Support Helpline. Our mission is to provide support and build power and community for the St. Louis LGBTQIA community through our programs, including the Peer Support Helpline, SQSH Book Resource Guide, Call Data Analysis and Advocacy Program, training and education opportunities, as well as mobilizing our community for grassroots efforts. So with that, I'm going to read out some contributions in the chat. Jessica, she, her, Amy, she, her as well. For folks who are on camera, I'm wondering if I could invite any of you to jump in and share out loud. So I'm seeing, I think, Amy, Leslie, Nate, and Jessica. Would any of you be willing to unmute and share what motivated you to join us for today's session?
Sure. My name is Jessica, and I was motivated to join today's session because I've enjoyed all the other sessions that have been in the Transition Tuesdays. I have a lot of friends who are LGBTQ, so I'm always willing to learn more about agencies that support those lifestyles.
Thank you for sharing, Jessica. It sounds like this is very personal. Leslie?
Hi, everyone. My name is Leslie. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I work for the Institute of Community Inclusion for UMass Boston. And cultural competency and inclusion is our whole mission, and it's something that always personally has meant a lot to me. I actually just completed a cultural equity course through an arts foundation, so it's just something that personally is very important to me.
That makes sense. Thank you for sharing, Leslie. I'm hearing that this is an important topic to people, both professionally and personally. And I wonder if Nate, Sue, or Wendy, any of you want to unmute and share.
Hello, I'm Nate Head with DD Resources, joining today, similar to what Jessica said, that I've enjoyed this year's round of trainings, and so always looking forward to learning more about the resources in St. Louis region, and hearing successes and challenges, and if there's any gaps, and how DD Resources can where it could fit in with that. So great to be here.
Thank you for sharing, Nate. Wow, this series is very popular from what I'm hearing. And I'm going to pop over to see if Sue, Wendy, or Amy wants to share.
Hi, I'll share. My name is Wendy Daniels, and I work for Epworth in the foster care program. So I work with youth, local youth in St. Louis City, St. Louis County, aging out of foster care. And especially our LGBTQ youth, they really need extra support and resources. So, so that's why I joined today. And then I also co-facilitate a monthly group that we have for them, a support and educational group.
That's really important. Thanks for sharing that, Wendy. And I appreciate you highlighting too kind of the housing disparities that LGBTQ people face, especially the disproportionate rates at which queer youth are unhoused. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Wendy. And with that, I'm going to screen share and start my presentation here. Okay. Can folks give a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Okay, thank you. So today's contents, I'm hoping we can cover Squish's founding and mission, as well as our values and programs. Some of you expressed, is there a way we can support or partner with Squish? So we'll go over those ideas as well. And remember, this is extremely interactive, so I encourage you to interrupt me, ask me questions in the chat, unmute, raise your hand. All of that is very welcome. So I'll start by explaining why I started Squish in the first place. I did a community needs assessment in 2019 and found that the St. Louis LGBTQIA+ population faces higher rates of violence, discrimination, housing insecurity, and substance use, as well as medical, mental, and sexual health disparities. At the same time, we also face additional barriers to accessing the identity affirming resources needed to meet those needs. So if you think about these two bullet points together, they form a vicious cycle, a negative feedback loop. The example I give is, for example, we know that queer folks are the most highly targeted population across the country for hate crimes. If a queer person experiences a hate crime on their way home, let's say it's their first time accessing resources, so they go to the police or go to crime victim service, or for therapy or counseling. At their service provider, let's say they are not their preferred pronouns and their preferred name are not respected, they're misgendered during the intake process, or the person serving them asks, what happened it's not a big deal, maybe it wasn't identity motivated. All of these factors and microaggressions can combine to make this person feel like these services are not for them, and make it less likely that they're going to access services going forward. So there's this negative feedback loop of they become them more vulnerable to other kinds of victimization or hate crimes or violence or discrimination, making kind of the resources accessible to us smaller and smaller, shrinking over time. So because of this negative feedback cycle, we know that drawing on power within our community is very important, it's important that we have services directly relevant to our community while also advocating for systemic change. Before Squish, no LGBTQIA specific helpline staffed by trained queer peer counselors had existed in St. Louis, at least for the past 40 years. If some of you were around in the 1980s, you might remember a gay and lesbian hotline. But even then, that was specifically only for gay and lesbian folks and not for the more expansive LGBTQIA plus community. Some of you might be wondering, what does the IA stand for and why does the acronym keep expanding? Well, we know that lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans folks are part of the community, but often QIA, so questioning, queer, intersex, asexual, aromantic folks are often left out of the conversation. So you might notice that even though it might seem like a mouthful, that I'm intentionally using the full acronym, and that helps to signal that this community is made up of not just sexual minorities, but also gender minorities and sex minorities, which includes intersex people. And if you have questions about what any of those terms mean, I'm going to drop an appendix, a glossary in the chat at the end of this presentation. So back to Squish's founding story. Our philosophy is that every queer person deserves to be treated compassionately and to access the community resources we need to lead fulfilling lives. We also found there were gaps in the local service system. So I remember Nate, you mentioning, what are the challenges and gaps in the local resource system? One of them we found is that while national LGBTQ hotlines like the Trevor Project and the Trans Lifeline exist, only a local resource, especially a grassroots resource, will be familiar with the St. Louis context. So like, what is an ER that's going to respect someone's expansive gender identity? And what is a local library that's a safe space for queer youth and has queer affirming books they can read? So culturally competent local resources and wraparound services so that we can holistically meet someone's needs. In addition, unlike traditional hotlines, Squish offers a range of emotional support resources, not just crisis intervention. So peer support or peer counseling provides an option for people to call and reach out, even if they're not on the brink of emotional breakdown. Just to share something a little bit vulnerable here, I have definitely personally, wanted to call crisis hotlines, wanted to reach out for mental health support, but felt like, my situation is not that serious. I'm not on the brink of crisis yet. Maybe I shouldn't reach out or take up resources that other people could use. So peer support or preventative mental health care is this idea that before someone is in crisis, they could also use support, whether that's talking through something, safety planning, finding out what resources are ahead of time before they need them. And in that way, we hope that we're serving a crisis prevention role in the local resource ecosystem. I'm going to pause for questions very soon. So Squish's founding story started in March 2019. We drew on identity-based peer support models. We developed a 50-hour peer counseling training curriculum using our experience providing support to survivors of relationship and sexual violence, as well as our lived experiences as LGBTQIA people. Our team recruited volunteers from all over St. Louis and graduated our first training class in August 2019. Since then, we've held a launch party to celebrate with our community that over 100 people attended, which I think speaks to the level of anticipation and excitement there is in our community for this resource. On the first day our helpline opened, we received a call. And since then, in the past 3 years, our peer counselors have helped to ground shelter residents experiencing panic attacks, provide space for queer and trans people of color activists to feel heard. We facilitate a healing for victims of sexual abuse and more. Our mission is to serve and strengthen the queer community in the St. Louis metro area and beyond by providing empathetic listening, resource connections, education, and advocacy. So on this slide, you can see our 3 pillars or part of our theory of change, which is to provide peer support, resource connections on the ground level, one-on-one, interpersonally, and then on the systems level, providing education and advocacy, including through trainings to our partners, community courses that provide resiliency and mental health skills for our community, and more. So I've talked for a long time at you. I need to figure out how to stop sharing. But I would love for folks to jump in with what is one thing that stands out to you from my presentation so far about Squish's founding and mission. And it'd be great if someone could help me figure out how to stop sharing.
If you roll up to the top of your screen, there should be something that drops down that you can hit stop sharing.
I see. Okay. Oh my, it worked. Thank you, Amy. Okay, so throwing the question back in the room, what is one thing that stood out to you from Squish's founding and mission so far?
I think the fact that you received a call to the crisis line the very first day it opened.
Absolutely. And Leslie, can you say more about what stood out to you about that?
Well, obviously, it the fact that it was opening got through the grapevine somehow to someone that needed it, and I'm sure the calls increased significantly from that point on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Leslie. And our call volume actually increased by 300% amidst the pandemic. So we've really had to scale up our capacity in the past few years. Wendy, do you want to jump in? And then Jessica, I think.
Yes, it just really stood out what you said about not having to be in crisis, because I could see a lot of our youth feeling that way, like, oh, I need to be suicidal, or I need to be having some huge major thing
Mm,
going on, rather than just being able to vent and make that connection that could possibly help,
mm.
not lead to that big potential crisis.
Yeah, absolutely, Wendy. That's a really good point. And we find that in the queer and trans community locally, one of the biggest causes of trauma is relationship rupture. So being rejected by people around them. 40% of queer people have been rejected by or not accepted by our families of origin or biological families. So this piece of relationship building, empathetic listening, and peer support has been really important to our mission. Yeah, thanks for jumping in, Wendy. Great point. Jessica, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just gonna reiterate what Leslie said. Not only that you received a call on the first day that you opened, but I mean, that probably means that that individual was feeling like at like true crisis mode because it was a brand new thing and they
Mm,
were just reaching out to anything or anyone that would listen to them. So,
mm,
I think that's pretty incredible
mm,
and terribly sad, but
mm.
it's good that you guys were there for them.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. And one thing I personally find really fulfilling about running the helpline is that often folks also reach out for things they're happy about. So if they're getting married, or if they are starting testosterone tomorrow, or if they are, for the first time venturing out of their house amidst the pandemic. I guess that last one is a little mixed, not necessarily just happy. But one thing we really like about peer support is it provides spaces for joy, for ambivalence, for confusion, for growth and healing as well. And we really kind of think about ourselves as walking alongside our callers as peer counselors. Great point, Jessica. Amy?
I didn't know which Amy. I was going to ask Luca, is it always anonymous peer support or is it like face to face on Zoom or do you guys have meetups and things like that?
Mm. Great question. So our regular service is over the phone, so that maximizes anonymity. We also turn off caller ID and don't track like caller ID and where people are calling from to maximize anonymity. Our call notes also remove all caller identifiable information. So that's a priority for our main service. We do sometimes do one-time in-person events, so we can offer peer counselors to be available at your event if that's a way that folks want to partner. So in those cases, confidentiality can't 100% be maintained, but we try and modify our regular service when we do one-off things like that. Yeah, great question, Amy. I think other Amy also unmuted if you want to jump in.
I was just going to say it really is making me think as an acute hospital system how we're right now in the process of going through the Missouri model to become trauma informed on our acute units, our inpatient units, and how we're providing that safety to this at-risk population, because I think oftentimes I know oftentimes it's very difficult when you're working in a hospital with other staff who don't necessarily respect gender pronouns and it's hard. And so like how are we supporting that group on our units, and what can we do to make sure and ensure that their safety is also a priority?
Mm. Yeah, Amy, that was really well said. Yeah. Would you mind sharing with the group some things you have tried so far to protect patients' confidentiality and pronouns?
Sure. So we actually within the last year have started now identifying pronouns in our electronic medical record. So we utilize Epic. Historically, we were told that we had to utilize the person's born biology, biology, male, female, and that those were our only options. But within the last year, we are now able to edit to put in their preferred pronouns and also their preferred name, which is wonderful. And so there's that. And then plus in our intake assessment for all of our patients who come through the emergency room EDs, we actually have specific questions and that relate to gender pronouns, to trauma specific questions that may help us better assist those patients once they get to the units. So we're able to kind of proactively have those conversations when they move to the inpatient units so that our patients aren't feeling like they have to retell their story over and over, especially like you said, it can be extremely traumatizing. And then also just being very supportive when it comes to working with families who are not as accepting. So just being there, especially with our adolescents and children, we're definitely encompassing the family. And, there's a lot of issues with consent and sharing of information and things like that. You want to be able to build a relationship and support the patient or the adolescent or child while also being respectful of the information that the parents are asking for. So we've been making family sessions mandatory so that we can ensure that the adolescents and kids are feeling heard in a safe space where we kind of provide that support on their side.
Wow, Amy, that was really comprehensive. And I imagine it took a lot of work to update the electronic medical records. So,
It's did, but it's making me think that we still have, well, we have a lot more to do. So I'm excited to hear more from you because I think this could be a great potential resource for us as we kind of spearhead the trauma-informed practice.
amazing, Amy. I wonder if you'd be willing to share your email in the chat for anyone who wants to connect with you about the work you're doing in the hospital system. Okay. Thank you so much, Amy. That was really wonderful sharing. I'm going to jump back to my screen share here. Okay. So you've heard a little bit about our founding and mission, and I want to share with you our values and programs. So SQSH's values, we have three that we hold really close to our heart right now and drive our approach to our work and programs. The first is called queer liberation. So that means we embrace a vision and transformation of society to eliminate identity-based oppression, advance collective freedom so that LGBTQIA people in the St. Louis metro area live with safety, power, and dignity. Our second value is transformative justice. So that means we respond to violence, harm, and abuse using a political framework that analyzes systemic oppression, relies on community support networks instead of the police, the criminal legal system, and we aim to transform the root conditions that allowed harm to occur in the first place. So this might sound really lofty. One of the ways in which we implement transformative justice is when folks call us, we try and walk with them in seeing their experiences as situated within larger systems. So a lot of time people will call and say like, it's my fault that my family hates me, or that I shouldn't have come out to my parents. It's like I'm such a burden to them. And a lot of this internalized shame and guilt is something that we try and gently myth bust if that's something they're receptive to or ready for or are seeking. So we might say, it's not your fault that you're gay. It's okay to be gay. And when other people respond badly, that's their responsibility for their behavior. Or we might, instead of kind of blaming a person for like bad things that happen to them or crimes that they have experienced, helping folks see like there are larger systems, social political systems in place, and that community support networks can come together. So that means we also utilize grassroots resources. We connect people to their peers, to their neighbors, to mutual aid networks. And that means that the resource database we have is then shaped accordingly by some of the more grassroots or resources that are not always on nonprofits, resource guides, or on people's radars. Then we find that using this more informal mixed methods approach really assists our callers. Yeah. So the last value I want to introduce is intersectionality. So that means we embrace an understanding of various social identities as contributing to the specific type of marginalization experienced by a person. So intersectionality theory describes the ways in which power structures based on, say, race, ethnicity, gender, class, disability, religion, citizenship, and other markers of difference interact to inform people's lived realities and experiences, and they shape systemic practices and policies. So intersectionality is a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989 to reflect a concept developed through the scholarship and experiences of women of color feminists in the 1980s. So all of our training programs, programming embraces intersectionality, and we hope that this approach centers the folks most marginalized when they're coming to our events, when they are calling in, when they are applying for a staff position, etc. So with these values, we run 8 programs. So this is a lot for a small organization to take on. So we take a pilot approach. We often pilot one program and then we assess the data we've gathered in the past year to see if this program is worth keeping, whether there are changes that need to be made, etc. So our peer support helpline is our most stable program, most visible program. We use it to provide emotional support. Our Squishbook resource database is a community-owned resource database that we run to provide resource referrals. I'm going to try and give a really quick live demo here. I can just shift this WebEx bar on my computer. Okay, so if you go to squishbook.com, you'll see a demo site. So this is still in beta phase, so please don't judge it too harshly. The Squishbook is a community-owned resource database run by and for queer St. Louisans, and service providers are welcome to use it as well to submit a resource, make sure that your organization is listed on here, as well as check out other resources that might be relevant. For example, if, let's say, I have a Black queer client or caller looking for resources, I might use that as a search term and find resources specific for Black queer folks. If, let's say, I'm looking for pharmacies, I might use the drop down here to find a resource, and search results come up. When I open a specific entry, you'll see all of the tags that it has, a description of the resource, the services provided, and links to their website, phone number, or other contact information. The reason we developed the Squishbook is because we found that a lot of nonprofits kind of maintain their own nonprofit resource guides, but then spend a lot of time updating it, keeping it up to date with contact information. Usually I see that an intern is assigned every summer to update it and maintain it. And we just wish there could be more collaboration across organizations. What if we could be using the same resource database? What if this could be community owned and run with an option for community members to leave reviews, for example, about their experience and submit feedback? So that is the goal of the Squishbook. We also run a program called the Call Data Analysis and Advocacy, where we track consensually with callers consent information about topics they're calling in about, so that we can give our partner organizations customized data reports about the kinds of needs and experiences queer St. Louisans are experiencing. For example, we worked with the St. Louis Continuum of Care to submit a report and presentation about the specific barriers that queer and trans St. Louisans face when they're facing housing shortages and needs. And one of the biggest reasons we found behind this is that queer and trans St. Louisans are disproportionately kicked out of their house by their families, and that is a large proportion of the queer and trans callers facing housing shortages. We provide trainings to partner organizations to build cultural competency and humility, education for the queer community for skill building, engage over 60 volunteers in grassroots organizing, and we also do population-specific outreach, for example, for queer and trans people of color, as well as queer immigrants and refugees. Finally, the last program we run is something called the St. Louis Queer Mental Health Coalition. It's a coalition of queer affirming healers, therapists, somatic practitioners in the area. What we do is we recruit them to provide services to our peer counselors for capacity building, and in return, we provide free training, education, feedback, support, and accountability so that they can provide better queer affirming holistic and mental health care. So we're currently recruiting for somatic healers into our coalition, and I'll speak on that in a little bit. But if you're a visual person, this map might be helpful. So this is a map of all of the programs I just mentioned and how they contribute to our strategies of healing, uplifting, and connecting until St. Louisans of all genders and sexualities can live with power, safety, and dignity. Our strategies include non-hierarchical emotional support, healing, justice, and community care, access to holistic health and wellness, building community power and systems change, building systems of accountability and feedback, as well as creating identity-affirming resource referrals. So I've talked for a long time. I'm going to stop sharing here and ask for one more round of interaction. So I'm wondering which of these programs folks have questions about or that stands out to you.
Are you able to provide your trainings virtually across the state? What is your coverage area?
Great question. So we can do trainings for anyone around the country. We do virtual trainings and in-person trainings. Our focus is the St. Louis metro area, so we prioritize partners who are serving folks in this area or based in this area. But we've done trainings for folks in Kansas City and other parts of Illinois, even in Florida and other states. Yeah, Leslie, does that answer your question? Yeah, great question. Okay, time for a couple more.
I don't have one thing. It's just processing it all. You've
Mhm.
done a lot. That's one thing I noticed early. Squish did earlier in the presentation. How quickly the group formed and launched. I mean, it was it a matter of months? I think back in 2019. So I'm just looking at your website and the training and education stood out to me. Gonna look into that more. And the Squish book is a really neat resource. In fact, I've in the process of sharing that with some coworkers right now. So.
Amazing. Wow, I love it when folks process out loud, Nate. That was really helpful. Jessica?
Do you guys have a lot of Squish members who are not only LGBTQ, I don't know the extended one yet, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Plus,
Mhm.
but also have a disability. So, like I work with people who are deaf or hard of hearing, but they could have anxiety, depression, a physical disability. Do you have a lot of your members have additional disabilities?
Great question, Jessica. And I think it's very relevant to our intersectional approach. So I'm glad you brought it up. We do have a proportion of Squish members who have different kinds of disabilities, from physical to cognitive to invisible disabilities. We don't currently have anyone who is deaf, hard of hearing, or mute. So that is an area we're expanding on. So we're working with Deaf Lead, for example, to provide ASL interpretation and more of our outreach and events. So definitely an area of growth. Yeah, Jessica, does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Amy, who's the host, how am I doing on time?
You are doing great.
Okay.
You could have another 10 minutes or so if you want.
Okay. Thank you. In that case, I'm going to go through a little bit of information about our helpline and then go into ways to partner or connect. Okay. So I imagine our peer support helpline might be the most helpful resource for folks on this call. So I'm going to share some information you can share when making a referral to our helpline. We describe our helpline as a peer support helpline. So what is that? Peer support is a process through which people who share common experiences or face similar challenges come together as equals to give and receive support based on the knowledge that comes through shared experience. So peer support was often credited as being piloted in substance use spaces, for example, Alcoholics Anonymous or peer support specialists. And I think we are kind of pioneering this approach within marginalized communities, within queer communities, because we believe that peer support can be very valuable outside of substance use as well. So we believe that healing happens when a place of trauma or pain is given full attention and really listened to. With the exception of a very small amount of calls, a lot of our callers are really just looking for a place to be heard, to be understood, and to connect. So in more serious or severe cases, we refer to mental health professionals or connect someone to outside resources. But the large majority of our calls, we find that folks de-escalate, feel better, have ideas on how to move forward, are experiencing healing simply from being listened to and connecting with a peer counselor. So our peer support helpline is open Fridays to Mondays, 1 to 7. These are weekend hours so that they can be accessible outside of traditional business hours. Our volunteers are highly trained. So one misconception I find about peer support is that anyone can do it, or anyone can get in a room and listen to somebody say processing a difficult experience. But before taking calls, all of our peer counselors actually go through more than 48 hours of training and evaluations on an extensive range of issues that our callers face. They then continue to train and refresh their skills throughout the year. Our helpline is confidential, so peer counselors will not disclose any information about caller's identity or situation. In situations where the caller is in immediate and severe danger, confidentiality may not be maintained in order to seek supports from other parts of a caller's life, but we still really value and prioritize the caller's agency. We're open to allies, so friends, family members, service providers, everyone on this call is welcome to call, especially if you're seeking support or information on how to best support the queer clients, individuals, friends, family members in your lives. We find that actually a pretty high proportion of our calls is allies calls or folks trying to better support queer folks in their lives. So if you feel like, oh my gosh, I have this stupid question, or I just feel awkward about saying someone's pronouns, can I have somewhere to practice? We actually really welcome allies to call, and there's a space for you as well. We practice a single session policy, which means each call is treated as a single session, not a continuing service with a case plan. So we're different from case management. Our peer counselors will provide referrals to outside resources if a caller requires ongoing mental health support. I'm going to look at the chat in a moment. All resources that have been vetted to be LGBTQ affirming will be noted and prioritized. So when folks are trying to find, say, a specialized or identity-specific resource, calling our helpline is a good place to start. We're caller-led, so our philosophy is that our callers are people who have life experiences, opinions, and preferences that need to be honored. Our callers are the experts of their own experience, so we work through issues at their pace. Our peer counselors take shifts in pairs, so for every 3-hour shift, at least 2 volunteers will be on call so they can debrief, support, and switch roles with the other after a call. And finally, it's important that we have a good support system for our peer counselors, so we connect them to professional mental health care, and we try and foster a tight-knit, supportive community to address compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, and burnout. So we debrief calls every month, and volunteers can also earn practicum hours or academic credit. So if you have any interns, students that you want to send our way or kind of give them some peer support helpline hours, this is a good potential program or opportunity for them. We also have an appointment system. So we launched a call request service a few years ago for increased accessibility. We know that it can be hard to pick up the phone and reach out to a service. So there's a schedule a call form called a call request form. For folks who have phone anxiety, scheduling a call can help, and a trained LGBTQIA affirming peer counselor will then call at your preferred time. I'm happy to send these out afterwards, but these are some resource cards, graphics that you can use, that you can share with your clients. And when asked, what did you find most helpful when you called? A caller said, I found it really helpful to hear my peer counselor's validation from a place of personal experience, to hear them tap into experiences of their own marginalization that parallel my own story. So there's this personal aspect here. And queer and trans person of color said, as a QT-POC, even when I'm seeking support, I constantly expect to have to educate and challenge people's assumptions in order for my feelings to make sense to them and for me to feel validated. During this call, I didn't have to explain the way that I usually do. So that's a flurry of information about our helpline. I would love for folks to drop questions or observations in the chat. So let's see. Leslie says, what advice would you offer to someone who is worried about making a mistake in their language use? How should they handle if or when they do make a mistake? Leslie, great question. And I would love for other folks to chime in as well. What we usually advise is if I mess up someone's pronouns or preferred name, to apologize and change my behavior going forward, but not put that person on the spot or apologize profusely. The goal here is to not put them in a position of having to reassure me or to say that it's okay, which is very common. And so I will personally say, I'm sorry I messed up your name. I know that can be invalidating, and insert their name. I will do better going forward. I also recommend practicing with other people. So I've definitely misgendered people in the past or used the wrong pronouns. And then I tend to talk to my partner or my coworker and say, hey, I've been really messing up this person's pronouns. Can you practice with me? As awkward as that might sound, I actually found that very helpful, and because it creates a safe, non-judgmental space where I can practice before I interact with this person. Leslie, does it answer your question? Yeah, great question. To all of the folks saying, can we have the PowerPoint? I'm going to drop in the chat. It's on Google Slides. I would love
I
to
can
get
also send it out afterward, and as well as a brief survey that Luca has sent to me. I will send that out to everybody on the webinar.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. Really helpful. Okay, I'm in this last stretch here, and then I will do Q&A with folks. So another program I want to highlight today is the St. Louis Queer Mental Health Coalition. This is a 5-year grant-funded project in partnership with BHR, the Crime Victim Center, and the SLU Queer and Trans Wellness Clinic. So what this project is doing is that we're calling for therapists and counselors to join our project to strengthen networks of care for the St. Louis queer community. Our goals are to reduce cost and stigma barriers to therapy, create safe channels for queer clients to get feedback, and improve the quality of queer affirming therapy and counseling in St. Louis. So what we do is we fund free therapy and counseling for our volunteers. So we pay your therapists or counselors who want to participate. By participating, they gain experience serving queer clients, honest and anonymized client feedback, a supportive learning environment, including free training and connections to other mental health professionals. What are the responsibilities? You might be thinking, that sounds too good to be true. Well, for 6 to 9 months, they're asked to provide therapy paid by Squish to our peer counselors for at least 1 hour a week. They're asked to participate in 2 hours of LGBTQIA training every 3 months, as well as join monthly 1-hour support and coaching sessions led by Squish. I wonder if any of you have had this experience, but a lot of the therapy sessions I've had or therapists I've worked with don't really have a robust feedback process. So when queer folks say experience harm, microaggressions, disconnect during a session, it can be really hard to push back. Most queer and trans St. Louisans we connect with or ask say that they just leave therapy, they don't come back, they just stop going because there's not a clear process for addressing harm or conflict. So what this project is set up to do is that we hold therapists accountable to feedback. We try and create a safe channel for clients to do so, but we also create opportunities for growth for the therapists. They might not know that they said something harmful. They might have done it unintentionally. Maybe there was misunderstanding. So the support and coaching sessions are meant to support the therapist participating to get better at providing queer affirming client care instead of giving up on, say, this area of their practice or this skill set going forward. So if any of the therapists in your organization are interested in applying, we encourage them to reach out to me or to go to this link, tinyurl.com/SLMHC therapist application. So it's pretty competitive and only suitable therapists will be selected to participate in the project. Licensed clinicians are preferred, but provisionally licensed clinicians and those in supervision are also welcome to participate. With that, I'm going to round up with ways to support or partner with Squish. So our current priorities right now are we actually have a photo shoot and fundraiser happening this Saturday that we invite all of our partners to attend. It's November 5th, 1 to 4 at Tower Grove Park. We're also embarking on some strategic planning and staff restructuring processes. So you might see us hiring folks and reviewing our programs and putting out announcements about that between this year and next year. Here's a graphic for this event coming up on Saturday. I'm really praying it does not rain because the whole thing is this is outdoors and a fun, hopefully supportive and connecting event where queer and trans St. Louisans can connect, build community, take photos, and uplift queer and trans visibility. So we invite folks here to attend and spread the word. In general, spreading the word about our resources and programs is really helpful to us. So that might include including Squish in your resource list, displaying Squish flyers, encouraging folks to reach out or call our helpline, donating to or volunteering with Squish, directing potential volunteers, interns, practicum students, grant opportunities to us. All of those are really welcome. And we really value reciprocity. So we want to do all of that for your organization as well, especially if there's alignment on our mission and programs and values. So where can you go to learn more after today? We have something on our website called the Queer Media Library, and you can find it on our website under the Resources tab. So this library can be used to deepen you and your coworkers' understanding of LGBTQIA topics because it's full of first-person accounts. We know that folks are busy, so these are like 5-minute videos, 5-minute blog articles. We really prioritize personal experiences here. This resource library is free for you to use, but we put a lot of labor into maintaining it, so we always appreciate donations to help maintain this resource library. That's all I have for y'all today. If you support the work we do, please get in touch. You can reach us through our website, social media, newsletter. And here's a sneak peek of our staff team. I am the only full-time staff right now. We have 2 other part-time staff, Cindy and Amanda, whom we're hoping to scale up to full-time next year. So I'm the executive director, Cindy's the peer support organizer, and Amanda is our digital communications manager. That's all I have for you today. I welcome all input, ideas, and suggestions. And if you're willing to help fill out our feedback survey, we really appreciate it. It's 5 minutes. I'll drop a link in the chat, and please select SQSH's founding mission and programs under the course type. All right, stopping sharing here. Amy, do we have time for questions or?
Yeah, we have a couple of minutes if anybody has any questions.
Okay, I love questions, things that stand out to you. Go ahead.
I have a question. Can you
Yes.
hear me?
I can hear
Okay.
you.
I was wondering, in addition to the mental health therapist
Mhm.
that that your support group offers,
Mhm.
will you also offer access or lists of supportive medical doctors and clinics, especially in reference to reproductive health, which is
Mhm.
always a problem for especially trans people?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is something we're still developing, but we do have
Okay.
some leads. I'm going to screen share. That is information we are currently crowdsourcing into the Squish book. So, for example, if you look up abortion care in the Squish book, you should be able to find some that we have included in our resource list. We're also adding a feature called vetted. So if the resource has been vetted by Queer and Trans St. Louisans or other queer-led organizations, there will be a badge here saying, say, vetted by Promo or vetted by MTUG or vetted by Squish. So basically, it's in development, but the reproductive and sexual health resource section is definitely one of our priorities.
Okay. Thank you.
Great question. Okay. Question in the chat. Is there a minimum age requirement for calling the helpline as well as for counseling and therapy? Great question. So there's no minimum age requirement, and we actually find that peer counseling is a really good modality for children and youth who often don't have their agency prioritized, and so being caller-led is a really great approach. I will say for very young children, let's say 12 and below, we're not always the best resource for them. And we assess that to be the case, say in the first 15 minutes, we might refer them out, especially if they're living in a dangerous situation or facing abuse. Yeah, so no minimum age requirement, but within the first 15 minutes, we usually assess to see if we're a good resource, a suitable resource for them. Where is the counseling training? Jessica, can you say more about your question?
You mentioned that there was training. I don't know if you said you were developing it or it's already available where counselors can come to you and learn how to be a better counselor for people who are LGBTQ plus. Where do I find that again?
Great question. So let me screen share. If you go to our website under our programs, I recommend clicking training and education. So that will take you to this page that has more information, including how to request a training, who we organize trainings for, all of our training options, and then our training pricing. And the easiest way to get in touch is to submit a form, or I can also drop my email in the chat. There are basically 2 options for therapists. One is they can go through a one-off training from our trainers, which is usually, say, anywhere between 2 to 4 hours, once or twice. A more kind of in-depth collaboration will be they partner with us to serve our peer counselors by providing therapy to them, and in return we give free training, feedback, support, and accountability through monthly programming. So depending on how involved your therapists want to be, they can do either option.
Great, thank you.
Great question, Jessica. Any other observations or questions? I would.
I will just say I think you guys are amazing in what you're doing. I'm so glad you've developed this. I think you said you're the first in St. Louis, right? Since 2019. So that's fantastic that you're able to offer this resource to our community. And I love the Squish Book resources because I think that is very much needed as well. So I just appreciate you coming in and sharing all of your information.
Thank you so much, Amy. I'm going to drop my email in the chat so folks can get in touch. But if anyone wants to partner or collaborate, we usually set up a one-on-one partnership meeting to learn more about your organization and what are some areas of synergy. So I really welcome that. And Amy, am I out of time? Was that a cue that I'm out of time?
We are running out of time. We have to move on to our next guest speaker, but we so much
Okay.
appreciate you coming in.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. I'm going to mute now. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Luca. All right, we're just getting hearts all over the place. Great information. We are going to move on to our second guest speaker, and I am not going to butcher her last name. So I am just going to call her Amy Kay, and she is the Network Director of Central Intake, a part of SSM Behavioral Health Service line. Her team of clinicians are tasked with completing mental health assessments on patients presenting to the emergency department with a wide range of mental health and substance abuse concerns. In addition to her work in the emergency department, Amy represents SSM Health on numerous community projects and initiatives focused on increasing access to mental health care and resources. Originally from Minnesota, she moved south to attend SLU and obtain her master's in social work with an emphasis in clinical mental health and program eval. And prior to joining SSM Health in 2019, practiced clinical social work in community settings, including school districts, community mental health centers, and the St. Louis City Circuit Attorney's Office. She's an adjunct instructor in the School of Social Work at SIUE and a licensed clinical social worker in Missouri. So again, I'm not going to butcher her last name, but let's welcome Amy Kay from SSM.
Thank you. That's so funny you said that. I have a kindergartner and he calls himself Max K just because that's all the teachers. They'll just stop right at K and he just raises his hand. So he thinks that's his full name now. But thank you for the introduction. I'm Amy Kinsevich, and I am the Network Director for Central Intake with SSM. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Right. There we go. Can everybody see that okay? Okay, awesome. So I know that that this group focuses on adolescents and youth, but I am going to talk just a little bit about our services in behavioral health for our adults as well, but I'll spend a little bit more time focused on what available resources we have for children and adolescents. Okay. So I'm going to start off with our inpatient behavioral health units. So these are acute hospital units where our patients come in and stay with us on average from anywhere from 3 to 5 days. These are for children, adolescents, adults, and seniors who have a behavioral health disorder that's threatening their well-being or the well-being of others. The hospitalization is needed to provide safety and support. They may need to start medication or have a medication adjustment. They're also provided psychotherapy and education, as well as family sessions on the units. We have inpatient units at SSM Health DePaul, St. Mary's, St. Joseph in Wentzville, and St. Charles, and then also St. Louis University. That doesn't mean that any of our EDs would not, welcomely help patients who present to those EDs. That's just where if you need an inpatient acute hospitalization, you would be transferred from one of our other EDs. So Cardinal Glennon is usually where people take their children or adolescents, and then they are transferred to one of our units. DePaul Hospital and St. Joseph's Hospital in Wentzville are the units and the hospitals that actually take our children and adolescents. So St. Mary's and St. Charles only have adult units there. The children are ages 3 to 11, and then after 11 to 17, you're going to the adolescent unit. So that's kind of how those are broken down.
Amy, I don't know if you switched slides, but we're still seeing your first one.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Is that better?
There we are. Yep.
I did. Thank you. And then the inpatient admissions at the central intake number at the bottom, that is where we will accept admissions from other outside hospitals. So we often get calls from mid-Missouri or hospitals outside the St. Louis region if they're struggling for beds. I'm sure that this is not new information to a lot of people on this call, but there is a lack of available acute inpatient beds for adolescents and children right now. They unfortunately are experiencing the longest wait times in our region in the EDs waiting for acute treatment. So we do have a list. We keep a list of admissions that are coming from outside, and those go through our central intake department. Then we have our outpatient behavioral health platform. So we offer outpatient programs for adults, and this is geared towards anybody 18 and older, working through stress, anxiety, depression, substance use disorder, or any mental health concern, really. And this treatment program is what we refer to as our intensive outpatient program. It meets 3 times a week for 3 hours, but is available 5 days a week. So patients get to pick which 3 days of the week, work for their schedule. And it's a very supportive and therapeutic approach. It is a group treatment approach that has usually no more than 8 people per group. So the adult services are offered at DePaul Hospital, St. Mary's, and then St. Joseph's Hospital in Wentzville. We also have SPMI programming at St. Mary's Hospital and St. Joseph in Wentzville, which is for adults who have severe and persistent mental illness. They can attend an IOP group for up to 4 hours a day, 4 times a week, just to provide a very supportive environment to help them either continue to be stabilized at home or in the community, or help them re-enter into the community at a lower level of care. So our youth and family outpatient behavioral health platform. So, and this, to be honest, is our BD's PowerPoint. So I see the typo. I'll have to give him that feedback. But this outpatient program is for families and teens up to age 17 who are also experiencing symptoms of depression, anxiety, and other mood disorders. What's really unique about this program is the family component is a requirement. So, and it doesn't have to be a parent or a guardian. A lot of times we have youth who will attend with their supportive older sibling, or who will attend with a neighbor or an aunt or uncle. Whoever is a supportive adult in this child's life attends group with them once a week. So it's the same intensive outpatient programming format where they come 3 times a week for 3 hours. And then 1 day a week, the youth and the support person come together. They spend an hour apart learning about this. Let's say it's communication. So the youth will spend an hour and the adults will spend an hour talking about effective ways to communicate. And then they'll come back together for the 2nd and 3rd hour and have group together. And that may include role playing or talking through some of the things that, they're processing and learning about. It usually lasts 4 to 5 weeks and is really specifically designed to try to keep adolescents and children stable in the community and prevent that acute hospitalization. The nice thing about this program too is it receives funding from the CSF grant. So a lot of times if children are underinsured or do not have insurance, we are able to still provide this service for them. And it also provides transportation. So with parental consent, we can help with transportation for the child or adolescent and their family member. That's offered at our St. Clair location as well as our DePaul location. And we will soon be expanding to 2023 to our Wentzville location as well. And we have our long-acting injection clinic. I did put this on there typically for anybody familiar with LAIs. Those are usually for adults 18 and older, but we are seeing 16 and 17-year-olds in the injection clinic. So if you do come across someone who potentially needs an alternative treatment, is not med compliant with their daily meds necessarily, then a long-acting injectable may be something that's appropriate. We utilize this for patients who have very poor follow through on their recommended care. And again, just to, help stabilize them in the community. So they get the injection of their antipsychotic medication once a month, and then it slowly disperses into the body throughout the course of several weeks. This is a program that gets funding through a 340B program, which also, again, provides transportation to and from their house, a shelter. We actually pick up some of our homeless patients under bridges and overpasses and parks and things like that. So, we're really trying to provide some wraparound mental health services for our patients who are experiencing poor social determinants of health. So I never want that to preclude a referral. We really work hard to make sure that we holistically support folks. And we have that program at Bridgeton, at DePaul, and in Wentzville at St. Joe's. Our S-ketamine clinic at DePaul is another treatment option for anyone who has failed two antidepressants or hasn't had relief, complete relief of their symptoms or been at baseline. S-ketamine is actually a nasal inhalant and a prescription spray, and it is a spray that activates a portion of your brain that really helps to bring people to baseline in their depression. It does have to be administered in a healthcare setting because there are some potential side effects to it. But again, we've had a lot of really positive feedback on the S-ketamine, and that also is covered under 340B. So if there is any financial restrictions to that, the hospital and the outpatient program will help all of our patients to figure that out, how we can get it paid for. We have our substance use disorder inpatient and outpatient program. So Treatment and Recovery offers an inpatient detox at DePaul. This is actually housed on a medical floor at our DePaul hospital, and it's usually a 3 to 5 day stay where you can detox from whatever substance you're using. And then we also have an outpatient platform at Wentzville. It just recently moved from St. Charles to Wentzville, so anyone who's familiar historically with it, that is new. It moved out to Wentzville because there was greater need out there than what we were finding in St. Charles. And so that is an IOP program, 3 days a week, up to 3 hours, where patients can get support for a substance use disorder. We do often have patients that need that intermediate PHP level of care or longer term hospitalization. And in that case, we try to partner with our community partners in the substance use disorder world, and then they end up referring back to us for outpatient treatment. So we do have a nice continuity of care there with our outpatient partners. And then the last thing I want to tell you about, in case you haven't heard, we opened 2 years ago the Behavioral Health Urgent Care, which is located on our DePaul campus adjacent to St. Vincent's, our inpatient acute unit. And it's in partnership with several of our community service providers and has developed a very transformative way to treat behavioral health patients in an attempt to keep them out of our area EDs. We engaged for over 3 years in this project to develop the urgent care with that goal of improving efficiency and improving care for patients. Oh, did I stop sharing it? Can you guys still see it? Nope. Okay. Sorry. I don't know what I hit. Okay, there we go. So it is a one-of-a-kind collaboration, the first in our region, and we are getting ready to hopefully expand to bring another urgent care to the St. Louis region in 2023. But patients who are not suitable are those who would potentially require immediate medical attention or are physically violent. Anyone else is welcome. And sometimes we do have our law enforcement partners or family members who will bring in somebody who does require immediate medical attention or is physically violent. But the good thing is we're on a hospital campus. We're very easily able to transport that person to a higher level of care if that's what's needed. Commonly, we see folks for depression, mood disturbances, anxiety, medication issues. We do have an NP or psychiatrist on staff and are able to prescribe medications. We see stress, grief reactions, psychosis, and disconnection. We will see patients up to 3 times for bridge medications. We know that it's really difficult right now and there's a long wait to get in to see a psychiatrist, especially if you're utilizing a CBHL in the region. So we will see patients to give medication refills up to 3 times after their initial visit to the urgent care, as long as, there's ongoing conversation about connecting to that community provider. And at the bottom, you can see all of the community partners that we're currently working with. So our community partners allow us to have expedited community admission via shared use of documentation. So an example of this would be a patient who came to the urgent care and lived in BJC's catchment area. That would be their CBHL that they would be utilizing. We're able to share their information with BJC and get them an expedited appointment because BJC uses their visit to the urgent care as their admission appointment. So there's no wait they automatically go on the list to see the psychiatrist or see the therapist. We have 9 community providers that give us next day business slots for our urgent care patients, and we actually are integrating some of those community providers into the urgent care. So right now we have 4 contracted employees from BJC that are working in the urgent care. We have real-time virtual admission with the starred providers on the right-hand side. And then we also have 2 community health workers that support the linkage and referral and that 45-day follow-up for Bridgeton area residents. So our community health workers are doing things like contacting BHR to look and see more to see if a patient has connected with a CBHL recently or is already connected to services so that we can ensure that continuity. You can see here we started off with some very rough drawings. We had a cardboard city where we kind of designed what we would want the urgent care to look like with large cardboard moving boxes. And then we had all of our community partners walk the space and give us suggestions and feedback on how it looked. And you can see now that the finished drawing here, this is an actual picture from the urgent care. The nurses station is in the middle, and then you've got the 6 rooms that are on the outside and strategically placed so that when someone is in the nurses station, they can see into the patient rooms for safety and security. Here is our waiting room, an example of one of our rooms. They do have televisions in them. And then just some action shots there on the bottom of some of our staff. This is an example of a heat map of where we are receiving our patients from. So you can see that some of our patients come from as far as Owensville to utilize the behavioral health urgent care. So right now, ED throughput for a behavioral health patient is around 600 minutes, unfortunately. But for those who visit the urgent care instead of going to the ED, we're right around under 150 minutes, which was our goal. So waiting on some updated data, but this was the first year's. There's our satisfaction scores on survey from patients who utilized the urgent care. Some more pictures. We've already somewhat outgrown this space. There's already been conversation about expanding into another space because we are seeing close to 30 patients a day in the urgent care. It's open 6 days a week from 9 to 7. Patients can arrive at 6:59 and start their treatment journey. We serve children, adolescents, and adults ages 5 and older. available for walk-ins. You don't need to make an appointment, very much set up just like a regular medical urgent care. We do need children accompanied by their guardian. There are situations where we would potentially see a child without a guardian, but typically we would prefer they be accompanied by their guardian. Questions? Awesome.
Amy, are there any issues where you would not see a certain person for a certain diagnosis or anything, or you guys serve everything out of your urgent care?
We do. We serve everything out of the urgent care. It's really only situations where we're not able to keep someone safe, or they, we do have access to PRN medications. We have a Pyxis in the urgent care, but if the urgent care is not necessarily staffed in the same way that an acute unit would be or the ED is. So if somebody is very aggressive or is, comes in, we've had a couple times where people who are experiencing anxiety or panic attacks come in with extremely elevated blood pressure or heart arrhythmias. Those people we would need to transport to the ED. But again, we would do that in conjunction with them. It's not one of those things where we tell you to go to the ED. We will definitely see you, transport you ourselves to the ED. Other questions? I will put my email in the chat and I will send Amy the slides. And if you guys have any questions, think of anything, please feel free to reach out.
Everybody's a little bit quiet this afternoon, I think. Does anybody have any questions for either of our speakers today?
I guess my question, Amy, is since I work with people who are deaf or hard of hearing, do you guys have interpreters on staff that are in the building, or do they have to wait till they come in?
So in the urgent care, we utilize an iPad that links directly to the interpreter service.
Gotcha. Okay.
When folks come in, Amy, would you help them get set up with something more permanent in terms of a doctor or counselor, or how does that work?
Yes, so everybody who comes in leaves with an appointment. So they have access to a full psychosocial assessment if they want. Some folks come in and they say, I don't want therapy, or I don't want to, go through this assessment. I'm just looking for medication, and obviously we honor that. But yes, we will set them up with psychiatry appointments. We'll set them up with therapy appointments based on their insurance, where they live, what their needs are. So it's very individualized for each patient and how they're presenting and what they're looking for.
Or I guess you might provide them other resources as needed.
Correct.
Or for example, you could refer them to Squish.
Exactly.
So do you often get people who come in who don't have insurance? And
Yes.
then how do you handle that?
So about 50% of our patients are underinsured or do not have insurance. So we fill out the financial aid application right off the bat, usually while they're waiting to be seen by the provider. One of my staff will go over that with them. We also have access to Medicaid and Medicare specialists if that's something that they need to apply for. But we definitely will work with folks. We never turn anybody away for lack of insurance, or we have a lot of folks who come in and don't have an ID, and that's understandable too. So we'll never turn someone away for that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions for our guest speakers today? Or do either of them have anything they want to add real quick? All right, well, we will wrap it up then. Thank you so much for joining us for our final Transition Tuesdays of this webinar series. You guys have shared so much information about different resources in the area, and we are just so grateful for all the information you shared with our group. I will be sending out the slides this afternoon, and then once I get the video, I will download it and put it on our YouTube channel. But you are always feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And again, thank you so much, and everyone have a wonderful rest of your day, and happy November.
Thank you.